Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's edition of MPC Markets Morning Call, 11th of August 2025. And headline today, Trump boosts rate cut hopes with new Fed appointment. So the market drifted higher on Friday night. We saw the Dow up 0.5%, the S&P up 0.78%, the Nasdaq up nearly 1%. They're finishing up pretty well for the week. Tech doing the heavy lifting, up 4% total for the week for the Nasdaq. The Aussie market drifted a little bit lower on Friday. I think we're starting to see a little bit of a pattern there, a bit of risk off into the weekend because of Trump's, what he can potentially do in terms of announcements on tariffs or the like. Now, basically, we were led higher Friday because September rate cut hopes were boosted because Trump nominated his top economic advisor, Stephen Moran, to fill a vacant seat on the Fed board, replacing Adriana Kluger. So basically, if Moran's confirmed, which I dare say he will be, it's a very high chance, he would participate in interest rate decisions. And he indicated that the appointment could be temporary, also hinting that the permanent replacement might dovetail with the selection of his successor for the Fed, Jerome Powell, so whose term concludes next year. So essentially he's doing what, he's preparing for next May because he can't get rid of Jerome Powell legally. So Powell's term comes up in May next year. Reports suggested as well the shortlist for the role, Governor Waller, the St. Louis Fed, James Bullard, Mark Summerlin, or potentially the National Economic Council Director, Kevin Hassett. So, obviously they're on the dovish side, and I was pretty surprised with the previous fellow who was looking into was a bit more of an economic hawk, to be honest, and it's not surprising to see his name drop off. So, those bets on rate cuts really did push the market a little bit higher. It's really good for growth stocks overall. We saw Apple up 4%, Google up 2.5%, Nvidia up 1%, Tesla up 2%. That banking sector made a bit of a bounce back as well, which is that bit of a bellwether for the broader economy after a bit of a rough start to the week there. And so really it was a lot of those growth names. United Health had a decent day, up 2.5%. We've got a close eye on that stock there, just in terms of forming a base and heading back higher after an absolutely horrible year overall. So there wasn't much in the way of earnings. We had Pinterest, the stock plummeted. As analysts flagged, social media group's second quarter sales were pretty poor. It was down 10%. Wendy's was up 1.3%, sort of similar to McDonald's. That style company, Expedia, was up 4%, raised its full year gross bookings forecast overall. So not a huge night really on Friday, I've got to say, but it did head a little bit higher. So what's coming up this week? Well, we've got Aussie earnings as well as the sort of tail end of the US earnings. We've got a couple of or one particular rate decision, the RBA on Tuesday, which will be very closely watched, along with CPI and PPI in the States, some industrial production numbers in China on Friday. So China relaxed some property rules and property ownership rules at the end of last week. So that story not very closely followed. However, it does enable people to buy more than one home outside of certain districts, etc. It's a bit of a difficult one to explain, but essentially it really does relax those property laws. So we do expect the likes of iron ore and things to probably head a little bit higher because the building industry was really what was holding it back. But on to earnings for Australia. Monday, we've got JB Hi-Fi and Car Group today. We've got Seven Group and Seven West Media tomorrow. Really does start to kick off into, fairly busy day on Wednesday. Headlining Commonwealth Bank, of course, Australia's biggest company. A couple of the insurers, Suncorp and IAG, on Wednesday as well. Treasury Wines, Evolution, AGL. Thursday, we've got some big names as well. Telstra, Origin, Pro Medicus, Temple & Webster, ASX and Ventia. And then Friday, just a couple there with Cochlear and Mirvac. So Cochlear is one of those ones that a little bit like CBA or Fortescue, the analysts are always seem to be very unders on. It'd be interesting to see those results. But as far as the US goes, tonight we'll have Monday.com on a Monday. Chink. Oklo, which is one that's not really, it's not a massive company, but it's one of the ones we're watching particularly closely, just due to the fact that they've got those small modular reactors and that gas deal with Liberty for data center powering. CoreWeave and Circle, which CoreWeave was a recent IPO. I don't particularly like the metrics there, so it'll be interesting to see how they go. Circle and Cardinal Health, Cisco and John Deere later in the week, Alibaba and JD.com out of China on Thursday. Ancor's an Australian company, but obviously reports in the US, so it's down in the global column down there. So fairly busy week overall. I think we'll be really stock specific focused, and probably I would say we're going to get a rate cut this week, and based on what Michelle Bullock said at the last meeting, sort of waiting to see how these tariffs are playing out. But the tariffs are really playing out in very watered down fashion. I think there's probably enough evidence there for the central bank governor to push through for a rate cut. It really will be all eyes on that CPI and PPI for the states. I would say with the Commissioner of Labor Statistics being fired by Trump after not getting after those revisions that we've spoken about in previous podcasts, the Bureau of Labor and Statistics will be on notice. So I do not expect inflationary numbers there. I think they'll find a way to make sure that those inflation numbers are pretty benign. And for those who say, surely they wouldn't do that, I mean, it's a pretty naive thing to say, particularly with someone like Trump in power. I think that, via sackings and threats, he would be making it very clear, or it would be very obvious, the sort of numbers he needs to dial out, because he needs rate cuts, which means lower inflation and lower jobs numbers. So he wants to give the picture of a weaker economy, and then he can push the Fed harder and harder to get those rate cuts through, because they do need to refinance quite a lot of debt this, over the course of this year. I believe it to be $7 trillion. US dollar was basically flat on Friday, so these commodity moves were really, they've done it on their own essentially. Gold was up slightly, silver up slightly, copper made a bit of a rebound, looking like it's nearing buying. It was definitely in the buy territory, but looking like it's near. It may have bottomed here slightly, and looking to head back up. So we may be looking at some copper stocks this week, in particular. Platinum was off a touch. Crude was largely flat. Iron ore was up a little, but continually just sort of grinding higher. It would be at some of the highest prices of this year. Lithium again up 3%. We did see CATL, CATL, suspend a mine in China over the weekend, which should be really positive yet again for the lithium stocks. So watch out for those. Overall, PLS and Liontown, our favoured names there. Uranium down 1.5%, but up 4.5% for the week. Bitcoin sort of drifted a little bit lower, and obviously the currency didn't move a hell of a lot there. So, yeah, as I said before, I think we'll be more stock specific on the ASX overall. The ASX was up very slightly on Friday. The SPI was up only about 5 points overall. If you'd like a bit of an earnings preview, I'm going to do an earnings preview for sort of random stocks or 4 stocks that we find pretty interesting over the course of the week. So if you just go to npcmarkets.com.au, click in the education section, you'll see the ASX earning preview here, and we've got one for CBA, JB Hi-Fi, Temple & Webster and Car Group. JB Hi-Fi and Car are today, obviously, and we'll pick 3 or 4 stocks most weeks and to have a little bit of a focus on and give you some previews there. I dare say that we're going to be a little bit patchy in terms of I don't know whether the risk reward is there to be doing a hell of a lot leading into earnings overall. We really, CBA and JB Hi-Fi are going to find it very difficult to justify their high prices. So we'll probably see an initial hit, and then the passive buying will just come back in. Car sales will be pretty closely watched. Good growth company, quality growth company in Australia, and Temple & Webster as well at high valuations. But seems to continually justify it. It's one of those stocks that I really like to have had on here at NPC, but we just never quite got on because I haven't been confident enough to believe in the story. But yeah, so that one's out a little bit later in the week, and I think on Thursday. So that really wraps it up for this morning, and we will speak again tomorrow morning. Cheers.
General advice warning. The content presented in this presentation is intended for informational purposes only and provides general advice only. It does not take into account your personal objectives, financial situation, or specific needs. This information should not be the sole resource when making investment decisions. We strongly recommend you seek the advice of a financial professional.